You are on tab 2, which corresponds to section 2 of the safety data sheet. This is where hazard information of your product is entered. Again, to the right, notice you will see our guidance window, which includes quick start instructions to help walk us through the completion of this section. Notice that there is a logical stepwise order for completing this section. First, starting with the GHS version. It has defaulted in US, however we could select Canada, EU, or one of the United Nations standards 3 through 6. Next, assign hazard classifications. If you already know the GHS hazard classifications of your product, they can be manually entered. We will discuss how to do so in a few minutes. If you would like to use our built-in suggestion wizard, it can be used to suggest health hazards of your product based on the chemical components or ingredients and their health hazards. By clicking on the suggestion button, the health hazards are summarized at the top of the report. Again, physical hazards cannot be suggested by any report. They do require testing. Environmental hazards are also not suggested by this report. Both of these can be manually entered if you know the physical or environmental hazards. The report contains detailed information on the ingredients and their hazards, and also provides a basis for the health hazard classifications. We will go ahead and we will add the identified hazards by clicking on this button. A Add Identified Hazards window has appeared. This allows us to quality check the hazards. We will go ahead and click on that button. And this gives us some feedback on possible issues or actions that we might need to do. For example, it lets us know that it added the H351 statement. And this happens to be a statement which requires adding target organs or effects. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. We'll press OK. Notice that the health hazards have been added into the classification tab. So you'll actually see a little table inside of this section, and we have the tab heading classifications. This is where those health hazards were just added. We have the associated pictograms that were automatically added through the suggestion wizard. The health hazard statements were added, precautionary statements as well. Let's now see how to add an additional hazard classification. Let's add flammable liquid class 3. We'll do so manually. We'll select the multi-select and click enter into the text box FLAM, and this reduces down to the flammables. We will double click flammable liquid 3, and we will notice under the classifications that it has been entered as an additional hazard classification. The associated flame pictogram has been entered, as well as the hazard and precautionary statements. You might decide to remove a hazard classification. So to remove a hazard classification, click on the classification tab, and let's go ahead and let's remove the flammable liquid by highlighting, pressing the garbage can, and we will go ahead and we'll delete the selected hazard item. So we're just going to delete that hazard class. You might ask yourself, well, what about the pictograms? You know, it may be difficult to remember which specific pictograms are associated with that, and so that's why we've produced the regenerate pictogram button. And so we will click on this button, and notice that this gives us the option to delete and regenerate. And so since we've deleted the flammable liquid class, we will delete actually all the associated pictograms, H and P statements, and recalculate them based on the classifications that remain. We'll press the OK button, gives us feedback as to what it did. Press OK again. So now we are actually where we just started. And so the same pictograms, so the flammable pictogram is gone, and also the hazard and precautionary statements associated with flammable liquid have been removed from the table. And then finally, step 4 is the check for completeness. And so we'll click on the check button, and again, as we mentioned earlier, we do have a reminder that the H351 statement contains square brackets. So let's take again a look at that. And that's under the hazard statements. And here's the H351, and you'll notice that we have root bracketed. And so since this is a carcinogen, if we know the root of the carcinogen, we would be required to include that. Notice that there are 3 additional boxes on section 2. And the first one is the general hazard information, and notice this is not burgundy color, so it's not required. And again, this statement came from our template, so we can zoom into it, zoom English, and this is a statement that relates to consumer products and just letting people know that it's safety data sheet is being done as a courtesy. We'll just delete that statement because that doesn't apply to our soap cleaning super cleaner material. The other hazards not otherwise classified is optional. So if the product has hazards that are not covered by any of the existing GHS hazard classifications, then describe them here. For mixtures and ingredients of unknown acute toxicity statement of percentage, this applies to products which are acutely toxic and disclosing the percent of ingredients for which the acute toxicity is not known. After completing tab 2, the next tab we will go to is 4.1 First Aid. Again, we can just click on it up here, or under Navigation, select First Aid.